slow motion, bullets flying everywhere, various global locations, and John Woo at the helm. I'm talking about Stranglehold today, and why I think it was one of the Xbox 360's finest games to ever come out. Let's delve into it here on Throwback. Now, you know, here at Throwback we have an affinity for the Xbox 360. It is my favourite console. It is the console that I spent the most time on. It is the console where I've developed lifelong friends who are now streamers as well, and played some of the quintessential games of my life. And I think the beauty about this time period in gaming is when you think about all the AAA titles that were coming out, your Call of Duties, your Halos, your Gears of War. For every one of them, there was always 3 or 4 underrated gems which would release beside them, and I really think that is where Stranglehold sits. It is such an unbelievably underrated game, and I really think if you haven't played it, you should play it. But let's delve into the history of it a bit more. Now, Stranglehold came out in the glorious year of 2007 when Xbox 360 games and PS3 games had that wonderful piss stain filter, but this was something different. Bullet shards flying everywhere, watermelons being blown up, and even the start menu was a thing of beauty. Developed by Midway and started in 2004, they teamed up with John Woo to make a sort of sequel to his film Hard Boiled, and it wanted to capture all of that heroic travail that was sort of given in those films and the essence and tone, and I think it did that perfectly. You go through this fantastic story, even though it's short. I get it's the complaint, it is short, I understand, but you go through this wonderful story of, you know, doing the right thing and always standing up for the right people, of betrayal, of shooting stuff up, and of large men with bazookas firing at least 3 at you in a row. There were a lot of technical issues with the game, obviously not on launch, but building the game, it was quite difficult to make, or so I am hearing from my very good sources at Google. Obviously back then nearly everything was running on Unreal Engine 3, and they had to use a heavily modified version of it to make sure all the physics and particle effects were all working in the way they should. They actually created a system called Massive D. Hey, I didn't name it, they did, but the D stood for destruction. So when you're destroying the tables, the pillars, the statues, the watermelons, that was all made specifically from this engine. The core of this game was to make you feel like you were directing your own John Woo movie, and I think it did that wonderfully with the introduction of Tequila Time. Obviously we know, yes, Max Payne did it, yes, Total Overdose did it, yes, Enter the Matrix did it. We know, I get it. The amount of people that joined the stream saying, is this Max Payne? And they're like, good God, no, it's in the middle of the screen. But I think that this did bullet time a lot better than any of those, in my opinion. That might just be because the stylized options as well, but I think it was the best of the bunch. It was also twined with this stylized, like, sort of poetic violence where every time you got a kill, or every time you made sure a man would never stand up again, it felt like art. When you were blowing up a fire extinguisher to make sure that man flew 50 million miles across space and time into the next zone of planets, it felt really good, and it felt like you were personally delivering this. You were in control of the movie. You could decide what happens. You could decide how you do it, because there were so many different ways to do it. Now, it didn't just have single player. That was the beauty of the Xbox 360, is that most of these cult games came with a solid multiplayer function as well. And I want to let you know, I know you all know that I am a demon at Gears of War. However, John Woo Stranglehold, I was the devil himself. I was unbelievable at this game. Probably not as good as that number 1 or 2 in the world, but that's fine. I was just very good at it. It was just a really good, robust offering for a game that really shouldn't have had that much sort of play or sort of you know, ability to go in the multiplayer scene compared to your CODs, your Gears, your Halos. Again, games were made different back then, and John Woo was no exception. Now, when it launched, Stranglehold released to, you know, a moderate reception, praising the destructible environments, praising the actual gameplay and the gunplay of everything that was going on. However, it got a bit slammed for repetitive combat and pacing. However, I think when you go back and you look at this game in its like self, when it's not released against a, you know, a COD or of that time COD, not Black Ops 7 as we know it now, but like, you know, a Modern Warfare 2, the Gears, the Halo, all these AAA titles that had everything going for it, it still stands up on its own. And it's about how a game makes you feel more than anything. Yes, how many times can you shoot a guy in the face before it gets boring? And let me tell you on this, it never gets boring. But for me, this game unlocks something in me. It unlocks the demon inside, and you load up on the menu and there's the choir playing and Tequila does his spinny thing and the doves are coming out of everywhere. It makes you feel like a badass, and I think that is part of the reason why this game has aged so well. It's about how it makes you feel. Games these days have lost that. They make you feel like a consumer. They are always wanting you to buy more. Here's a battle pass, here's a half unfinished game. Somebody just bring out something that gives me that feeling like Stranglehold does and still does today, where the game has been complete. It comes with a solid multiplayer section that's just an addition. You don't need any skins, you don't need anything, you don't need a battle pass, it's just there. This game is the essence of Xbox 360, the essence of us growing up, and I understand that there are more games out there you can relate to, like Gears of War, your Halo, your Call of Duties. I'll keep saying them over and over. Yes, I get it. They were the games that raised us in multiplayer lobbies. They were the games where we played with our friends. But this was just such a solid niche experience. And I'm really sad that Midway actually went bust shortly after this. There was a planned sequel featuring Vin Diesel. Don't know how I feel about that. But I feel like they really tried to push it out with this, and they really did capture you being the director of your own John Woo film. There was even more that we could have had from this game in total, but obviously crunch was still a thing back then and will always remain to be a thing until GTA 6 releases and the world can rejoice in a happy bliss. But that is my retrospective for today, and I am very happy that I get to do these videos and talk about some of the coolest games we've ever played, or I've ever played at least. And you know what, if you don't agree, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. But you load up Stranglehold, press down on the D-pad, do a tequila spin, and tell me you don't feel like a badass. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time on Throwback Games.